Yes, sir. You can.
Good morning, all of you. Today's resource person are joined online platform. Dr. Vidya Rao, ma'am. He is a senior professor in Art Commerce Science College of Ahmedabad, Gujarat State. She is working as a recognized PhD guide. She is working as a member of state level and national level various academical and research committee. So many research paper published in a reputed journal. I request to Dr. Vidya Rao, ma'am ji, please start your session, ma'am. Hello.
Yes, sir. I will just. I will have to share the screen. Yes. A very good morning to all the distinguished participants of this PhD coursework. The coordinator and the head of the English department, Dr. Dilip Chauhan, sir. Dr. Mahesh Nivargi, sir, who has contacted me. And I have been informed that this PhD coursework is compulsory as a pre-registration for further PhD research. And before I begin my presentation on today's topic, ethics with respect to science and research, I wish all the participants the very best for research work in the future. And I hope that my session and my expertise in this field will help you further to do research in a better manner. So I now share the screen and my PPT, and I will simultaneously as well make some explanation and presentation as we go along. At the end of the session, for about last 15 to 20 minutes, I think we keep it for the open discussion, and I will end my session by about before it is 1 o'clock. All right, sir. So I now share the screen. Okay. Is my screen visible to all the participants and everyone who is part of this program?
Yes, ma'am. Please continue.
Okay. All right. So now I begin it here. The topic is scientific conduct, ethics, and ethics.
Sorry for disturb. Your presentation making presentation mode, ma'am. Your PPT make a presentation mode.
Okay. This is how you want it, sir?
Yes. Please continue, ma'am.
Okay. So now just a sec. Next. Okay. All right. The scientific conduct and ethics with research to science and research. I'm Dr. Vidya Rao, Associate Professor and Head of the English Department with the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan's College of Arts and Commerce, Ahmedabad. This is affiliated to Gujarat University. All right. Why a course in research ethics? We all feel it is someone else who needs ethics and not me. We always feel that it is I don't need it, but somebody else needs it. All researchers engaged in any kind of research activity can be a part of this research discussion of ethics. However, that does not mean that ethics education is about finding correct or the honest answer. And why do we need research in ethics is a very important question, because it is not as if this is part of your grooming, or this is part of your lecture bazi, as the our young students would call. It is always said that if anybody and everybody who needs any kind of help will always, this will act as a guiding force. This will act as a guiding force in our further research activities. However, this does not mean that ethics education is about finding the correct or the honest answer. So what this, especially this coursework to young beginners of research activity would help would be that it will try to help you. It will be a guiding path in search of the correct on the to adopt the process of research. A detailed discussion and a conscious awareness allows the researcher to deal with or to develop strategies for recognizing, approaching, and resolving the ethical questions. So first and foremost, we should be able to recognize, we should be able to approach any kind of research topic with the correct perspective, and resolve if any ethical problems arise during our course of ethics. During the course of one's academic or professional career, reputation for honesty and integrity can lead to one's advancement and progress. Undoubtedly, a very good and a very efficient and an able career and a professional career is always respectable in this society, and it will undoubtedly give you a sense of immense satisfaction. And therefore, right from the beginning, if we adopt an ethical approach, a correct means, then undoubtedly one will definitely have a better idea. Without doubt, this integrity helps find one employment, to obtain research grants, to be important research findings and activities, to be successful and respected as a professional. So wherever you go, your reputation always precedes your name. So therefore, what matters is where in before entering any room for an interview, the interviewer would already know what kind of a person they are going to interview, and therefore, if you have a very clean reputation for methodical and good work, undoubtedly this kind of person is always preferred in any kind of job opportunities. Research and the question of ethics. We know that ethics comes from the Greek word ethos, which means character. Um, this incorporates studying and learning value concepts, good, bad, right, wrong, and other guiding principles, which play a very important role, uh, in our research career. A person's professional career, a journey which is continuous, requires honesty and integrity and self-reflection, and therefore, one's at a very young age, often on the life throws certain challenges upon us, and therefore, unless and until we don't hold on to those challenges, and we don't have a very honest and a clear reputation and character building, there is no way that we can go ahead in this professional journey of ours. Um, any scientific research should therefore be both innovative and accurate. Therefore, what kind of research topics you come about, you cannot keep doing the same research topics that has been handed down to us down the ages. You have to think something out of the box, and therefore it becomes extremely important to believe that what you are doing is going to be something totally new. There should be reliability and responsibility, as the society implicitly trusts the scientists and researchers to be ethical and honest. So therefore, we have a responsibility as future teachers, future professors in reputed colleges. because the society, we are the guiding light to the young impressionable minds. And unless and until we are not ethically brave and clear, there is no way that we can teach these kind of honesty values to our students. And therefore, the society has implicit trust in us. So we have a greater responsibility. It has become even more important and profound as there are rapid advances in technology. All of us know that with the click of a button, there is the as our students will say, Google Baba. All right, at the click of the button, pages and pages of research articles, Wikipedia, etc., comes down to us. And in such situations, it becomes extremely important to hold on to we probably students, our generation students who we teach now probably have not even had a look at the library, have not even visited the books for proper kind of research at the graduate and the undergraduate level. And therefore, to break that habit, we need to we definitely take help of technology, but we don't misuse and abuse technology. The tools are so varied and accessible that it becomes impossible to detect unethical behavior. We hardly know at the undergraduate level where there is a research project that they are supposed to undertake. We hardly even get to know how and from where they are getting all this material from. But undoubtedly, all the students end up getting good grades because that is what the whole race is about. So, as young researchers, we need to find out what our research topic should be. It should be very accurate. It should have a total focus on what you are planning to do and what methods one is going to adopt. As young impressionable minds, I'm sure that many of us are confused about the correct and the honest and effective ways of the methodology, as to what methodology one should go about. I now come to the next one, that is the definition and the scope of research ethics. Uh, what, uh, what is the need of ethics in research? All right, so many of you would say that. I would say that how would you define research in ethics? Research ethics are a set of principles which should be adopted by the researcher. And of course, it's a two-way process. Research organizations on how to conduct themselves dealing with research participants, other researchers, colleagues, and users of their research and society in general. So it is a two-way process. Say, for example, you're associated with a particular university, and how, as a researcher, as an individual, you have a certain responsibility to your institution, to the society in which you are conducting your research. And it's a two-way process where the institution is also has to take some liability about the how the research is conducted, whether the individual, the researcher, is using the correct forms, correct methods for further research process. When social science researchers are conducted, then the ethical principles include those pertaining to projects. Social sciences say history, anthropology, psychology, etc., English literature, minor and major research topics, thesis, data collection, projects involving human participants, use of secondary data, etc. So when there is a research being done in the, especially in the field of, say, psychology, the field of sociology, or in the medical sciences, lot of data has to be collected from all over the society. And therefore we have to be extra careful where human or animal subjects or participants are involved. Ethical principles involve respect and regard for the participants and user. One of the most important things which a researcher has to keep in mind is that he or she has to always respect the subject participant on whom the research is being conducted, because the subject has volunteered to be your participant, and therefore no kind of pressure, no kind of exploitative practices should be used for the participant. And of course, we all of us know that in order to get more funding for one's institution, for one's organization, or say laboratory, or one's college, this research is a very important and a very good incentive to bright young minds. Undoubtedly, now it has become mandatory for a professional requirement, and failure to follow may result in disciplinary action. So research ethics and research, they are part two sides of the same coin, and unless and until you are not involved in research, there is no way that you can have any kind of professional development, professional advancement career in your career. And but if you don't adopt any proper means, then undoubtedly, due to stringent legal disciplinary measures, any kind of legal punishment can be given to you. Probably things have not yet become so very stringent here in India, but as far as we know, in the case of publication, uh, lot of changes are being made so that there is no duplication and fabrication and plagiarism as far as the publication details go. Purpose of research in ethics. What is the purpose? Why do we need ethics? Why do we need ethics in research? All right. Need because it is the most important aspect of any research should be that it should contribute to the well-being of society. Unless until that is not done, there is no way that our research is going to be helpful to the society. The welfare of the research participant should be the primary goal. The aim of any research is pursuit of knowledge, undoubtedly, truth, and not to commit any errors. This goal is promoted by ethics in research. So unless and until we know, we have a clear background of how to go about conducting research, there is no way that our path is clear about the pursuit of knowledge. It promotes values that are essential for any collaborative work, and has an accountability and respect for the subject. So if we are to work as a team, if there are more than two researchers, if we are working in a laboratory, then there should be no kind of ego clashes. There should be no discrimination. The entire team has to work together to bring out the successful output. Research ethics safeguards the participants' subjects from any form of exploitation, ensures their respect, dignity, and privacy. So what happens is, unless and until we don't recognize the participants as human beings, or we don't recognize the subjects as an important part of our research activity, there is no way that our research will be successful. And therefore, giving respect and dignity and privacy to our research participants is of primary importance. It makes the researcher accountable to the public or institution for proper usage of funds. All of us know that our institution or our university or other funding agencies spend a lot of money, where there are clinical research being done, where there are pharmaceutical researches being done. All of us have seen during the COVID-19 times that crores of rupees were being spent on the discovery of the correct right kind of vaccines. So therefore, where there is so much of usage of funds, the researcher's responsibility becomes all the more, because it is it is his responsibility to make proper usage of funds. Research ethics imposes certain restrictions on the researcher so that no unreasonable demands or unsafe methods are adopted during the process of research. So when you're using a human or an animal subject, there is no way that you can have any kind of unwanted demands, which may include, say, monetary demands from your participant, which may include other, say, sexual demands from your research, from your participant, or it may include any kind of unwanted and unethical demands, which we have come across in a number of cases. So this serves to be the purpose of ethics in research. What are the basic ethical research questions? All right. Scientific research ethics can vary by discipline and by country. A very important point, especially because in a country like India, where research ethics differ from probably from state to state, where, say, for example, we have so much of cultural diversity in terms of language, in terms of food, in terms of dress. So you cannot have any uniform kind of blanket legal cover regarding research ethics. So a researcher in India has to be aware of the cultural diversity, and Indian researchers should give utmost importance to cultural diversity, because then there comes the question of, say, tribes, there comes the question of caste, there comes the question of religion, so on and so forth. And therefore, they must have a suitable framework within which they give equal importance to customs, traditions, language, caste, creed, color, regions, etc. And many studies have been undertaken to provide researchers, officials, funding agencies, and others who create, modify the code of ethics in scientific research. These studies reflect all those engaged in research in emerging scientific disciplines and who may face new ethical challenges. Such studies help us to understand which and what kind of ethics are common across disciplines, how these may vary in different countries, and how emerging topics are shaping future ethics. We need to have a clear and better idea of how research is conducted rather than on how research is applied. So now that we are in the beginning of the journey of our research process, we need to understand, probably the mentor, the guide has to sit down with their students and give a better understanding of how the research is conducted, and rather than how your research will be applied, the of the researcher, so that unless and until the guide does not give him or her clarified idea of how it is conducted, there is the researcher undoubtedly will be lost in this entire web of information which is being thrown to him in this wide world of www. Okay. Research, especially in the field of medical sciences, psychology, microbiology, where a subject participant plays an important role, they have to be considered as volunteers. You cannot have any kind of uh, pressures on them. And the aim of any research, therefore, is to maximize the benefits of research to the participants, all right, and to minimize harm to them. So there is no way, and when you are dealing with children, you have to be very careful. When you are dealing with special communities, when you are dealing with minorities, when you are dealing with special tribes, when you're dealing with certain people who speak only a certain language, at that time, you have to be extra sensitive, and you cannot have a generalized rule which applies to someone else as well. All right. We need to be aware of the process of scientific inquiry. Why do we need to be aware? We need to be aware to understand the ethical of the research and the ethical treatment of the participant. One of the most important finding of the ethical principle guidelines is that researcher has a duty towards society. We need to remember this very important. There should be no conflict of interest with any other research or survey. Uh, One has to adopt an informed consent policy. There should be no conflict of interest, that there should be no duplication of what you have done in your particular institute or laboratory, and it should not be done somewhere else. Same goes with the publication. One has to adopt an informed consent policy, that is, you should inform your subject of the various advantages, disadvantages, or the various harms which the subject participant might undergo. There should be non-discrimination, non-exploitation for the subject participants. The researcher has to find out, the researcher has to maintain a strict confidentiality and a privacy policy. There is no way that you can or make जैसे सबको बता दे कि भाई मेरा research outcome ये हुआ है. Right? You have to keep certain data very confidential. You cannot publicize, you cannot publish beforehand. The different information regarding your subjects, and you have to maintain certain policies which will not reveal the identity, very important, which will not reveal the identity of the subject participant. There are newer methods of research which will benefit the research without any kinds of discrimination. For instance, research in the field of psychology, sociology, history, anthropology have to take into consideration the age, gender, identity, the sexual orientation, and the socio-economic status of the subject. All right. Okay. Certain variations and changes. There might be certain variations and changes as far as ethical principles in research go across disciplines. As research may involve human or animals as subject, it is possible that ethical guidelines for research may vary across countries, also due to local laws, oversight. That is, not every society, not every institution, not every university will have stringent rules, policies to catch these kind of unethical research going on, cultural norms, or whether research is conducted in the researcher's host country or foreign country. Because you have a number of researchers who come down from other countries and who are doing research in India. It might be in the field of anthropology or archaeology or iconography, and therefore especially for these kind of researchers, they will have separate rules and regulations because they are working in a foreign country. The researcher has to keep in mind significant historic events that bring about the changes. uh, Say for example, in a war-ridden country, or if there are number of internal conflicts, in such kind of situations, a researcher cannot impose his viewpoint, and therefore has to be careful when research is being conducted. There may have been ethical lapses that may have occurred also to safeguard rules, and therefore it is not as if some previous ethical lapses will lead to precedents. Later on, there might be certain changes which will safeguard, which will create new barriers, new kind of impact rules for the new researcher. There may be certain changes in cultural values and behavioral patterns which call for newer ethical principles. So what happens is, considering the behavior, say, of children, considering the behavior of say disabled people, considering the behavior of certain senior citizens, you as a researcher in this particular in any particular field that you go for, you will have to form your own intuition, adopt your own intuition, and make your own newer ethical principles. As I keep telling you, that there is no way that there will be a blanket rule, similar generalized rule, which is applicable to one and all. During the research process, the researcher has to pause time and again, all right, and go back often to find out if the methods used are proper for the chosen topic. So, any researcher, when he has started off his research journey, his PhD work, पूरे जोश शोश में उसने शुरू कर दिया होता है, पर फिर वो कहीं ना कहीं खो जाता है, क्योंकि he is bombarded with so many articles, so much of information, that he's lost somewhere, kahin खो जाता है वो. So repeatedly, he or she has to stop midway in the entire process, say somewhere after the collection of the primary sources or the collection of the secondary sources, and think whether all that he has been doing, all the method that he has chosen is the correct one for the chosen topic of research. Uh, he then has to probably talk to his guide, that is the mentor, or he can have some kind of small discussion with the expert in the field or his own friends and colleagues, so that things become clearer, because he does not then go around beating around the bush. He has to find out whether the sources of information, documents, articles, books, the e-sources, etc. are enough. यानी कि इतना सारा अवेलेबल मटेरियल होता है, तो कि भाई इतना मुझे काफी है, इससे आगे नहीं जाना है. All right, whether that much is enough for me to finish my research work, and whether then he has to correct to explore the multiple aspects of research issue. Then then he will realize that this much of material is enough, because it will lead to one article will lead to the another just at the click of the button. And at that moment, he will realize that yes, this much is enough. This much of secondary sources are enough. And now I can go about explaining, exploring the multiple aspects of the research work that I have undertaken. All right. implementation of research and ethical principles. All right. So who all of us are wondering if मैं तो research कर रहा हूँ and there is no monitoring, there is nobody who is there is no hidden as such as to how and whether the researcher is going about the right way. But how will a person find out? All right. But there are certain rules, certain policies which are enforced. And most of all, it is you yourself as a researcher, because it is your intuition, your inner voice, and your conscience which matters the most as far as the ethics are concerned. It is not as if somebody has to beat you on your knuckles. ऐसे मार के आपको सीधे करने की जरूरत नहीं होती है. It is your own intuition which will finally work out and which will draw the line of code of ethics. So how implements these research ethical principles? It is important that codes of ethics be monitored, enforced to identify, dissuade, and punish unethical behavior. There are a number of funding agencies, there are a number of rules and policies which are formulated by the UGC, by our own institution, by our own university. Like, say, for example, plagiarism checks are done, other various kind of rules and regulations are being followed, a number of brainstorming sessions are also organized by the university departments. So all this is undertaken so that the researcher and the mentor know that the researcher is on the correct way, correct path of doing his research work. There are a number of professional societies, say, for example, in English literature or in psychology or in sociology. Each state will have their own professional bodies. There are national bodies as well. National level regulatory agencies like the UGC, peer reviewed journals that update regular ethical standards. All right. So regularly, all these societies, all these bodies, because they are huge funding agencies, they regularly do it. Implementation of ethical codes. Implementation of ethical codes may vary. A scientist being expelled from a professional society. So, what is the kind of a disciplinary action that can be taken? All right. The various kinds of disciplinary action that can be taken. A scientist can be expelled from a professional society, which may or may not affect his career, or a physician losing medical license either temporarily or permanently. So, say if it is in the field of science, which if it is in the field of medical science, especially, they are playing with the human beings, lives of human beings. Therefore, it becomes all the more stringent and all the more necessary to apply, to take legal action against the practicing doctors or practicing researchers in the field of biomedicine and so on and so forth. But where there is no major or harmful impact on the human society at large, the maximum that a person can be affected is debarred from this particular professional society. Or probably if you're already in your teaching career, then probably the other action which the government, the state government can take is cut your increments for 2 or 3 years or so on and so forth, or drop you from your next grade, not give you promotion, so on and so forth. These are ways and means which are locally decided, but definitely some kind of action is definitely taken as far as the ethics is concerned. Ethical principles should begin to have influences through the process of education and formal training. And therefore, what is important is right at the beginning, right from the beginning, probably right from our undergraduate, level to from till postgraduate, and then later on, the students should have some kind of training, should have some kind of exposure to research work, to what happens when the research work is substandard, when the research work is plagiarized, it is stolen from literally verbatim from somewhere else. So this kind of exposure to the undergraduate and the postgraduate level should be regularly given, so that it has a long-term influence when the student finally takes up his research at the PhD level. The training of researchers goes beyond classrooms and textbooks, and therefore you cannot have any kind of limits, any kind of boundaries. It can happen in your staff room, it can happen in your library, it can happen in the campus, anywhere, any kind of mentoring on the part of senior professors to the to the junior assistant professors, or even to our research students, can probably make their minds explore better and newer ideas. And therefore we should not just restrict ourselves to classroom teaching and to textbook teaching, where we can explore other possibilities as well. Mentorship plays a very important part in this entire system of ethical principles in research. It is how your guide, how your university, how and why does your university or a funding institution or your research laboratory backs you? What kind of support system does your mentor give? Whether he or she is always readily available, he or she questions the methodology that you have adopted. They are able to look for better ways of research ideas, research topics, whether they are able to expand the horizon of the researcher. All of it, the responsibility is not just of the researcher, but also of the mentor, the guide, who plays a very important part. And therefore, ethical scientific research is not limited. Scientific research and ethics is not limited only to the researcher. It is also a part, it is also necessary that the research guides, the recognized research guides at the university level, they too become aware, or they too are made responsible for any unwanted, unwarranted misuse of information, misuse of research done by his or her student. Okay. So, experienced and creditable faculty has a strong influence on researchers. And therefore, this mad rush to get into, to become guides on the one hand, which all of us, all senior faculty, all across the universities have seen, and the mad rush of the students to pursue their PhD has to be balanced somewhere, has to have some kind of reality check, so that both of them know that they are on the right path, and they both have some kind of interactive credibility in their for their future journey. Okay. Guidelines for research ethics and the law. The guidelines for research ethics differ from the laws. That is, laws, of course, are the legal action which are taken, which are implemented, which are put into force by any of the agencies. The guidelines are similar to the tools used by the researcher. UGC has brought out, if you will check your latest guideline policy by the UGC, it has brought out it is called, I will discuss about more about it tomorrow, GARP 2020. All right. So various guidelines regarding research policy have been published by the UGC. So these guidelines are some kind of tools. They are to be adopted by the researcher, which will act as a support system, which will uh, help him to not to deviate too much, because it is not possible not to deviate too much to other means and other wrong methods. All right. For instance, it may be illegal as well as unethical as well to inflict any harm or suffering to the human or animal subjects. So this has to come, nobody has to tell the researcher. The researcher himself or herself has to be ethically or be aware of these kind of rights and wrongs. Institutions, universities should provide guidelines for research ethics to their employees, researchers, and the students. And therefore, when a student fills up the form as a pre-registration process, at that time itself, if the research student is given a booklet of to do and not to do, all right. So at these kind of activities, these kind of guidelines will ensure any wrongdoing on the part of the young researcher. This will promote research ethics and encourage more discussions. And therefore, unless and until we are not told, we are not talking about the painful spot of ethics, we will never deal with it. And therefore, it is extremely important that we have uh, discussions with among our teachers, among our mentors, with the university departments, so that there is a whole atmosphere, पूरा माहौल बन जाता है जहाँ students easily लेन देन कर सकते हैं कि भाई ऐसा करना है और ऐसा नहीं कर सकते हैं. So that is where they draw a boundary, they draw a line. They should have specific procedures to handle suspicions and accusations related to any breach of guideline. So it is the responsibility of the mentor, of the university, of the department, and of the institution, that if they find anything suspicious, if they feel that he or she has misused the trust of our institution, then there should be some kind of method, some kind of ways to find out if it can be proved, and not just impose any stringent action on the person. And therefore, we will see that there is a growing attention to privacy, security, and software systems. All right. So you have a number of journals, articles. You have a lot of websites where you have to pay even to download the article, to read the article. You are given security passwords, so that these are ways and means in which the ethical research on the e-sources is implemented. There are various software systems which trigger your which check your plagiarism, which check your originality of idea, and so on and so forth. So newer methods are very updated, very enhanced codes of ethics, and gradually there is a gradual change, a gradual shift of thinking, or I hope on the part of the researcher, especially in areas of artificial intelligence, where it easily detects certain kind of wrongdoings. And if the researcher fails to observe the legal requirements, then naturally they are punished by the uh, institution. Uh, Now we come to freedom of research ethics, and society. All right. That is, now till now we talked of how our research process begins, what guidelines should be adopted for the ethical principles in research, and how our research will have an impact on society. But we also need to, as a researcher, what kind of freedom is available to us? That is also a very important question. Research is a continuous, socially organized quest for new and better insight, knowledge, and truth. So, any research should be for the betterment of yourself, of your own academic career, as far as your own individual selves are concerned. Undoubtedly, all of us will agree that it is also a part of our professional and academic advancement. Researchers have to adopt honest honest documentation and consistent reasoning policy. Wherever there are statistical data to be collected in the field of sociology, in the field of psychology, in the field of education, number of statistical data has to be collected. So you cannot उसको गलत तरीके से हम लोग present नहीं कर सकते. All the data that is collected by the researcher, by the participant, has to be transparent. There has to be put forth in front of the committee, in front of the ethical research committee, so that your research process becomes easier. Research in humanities and social sciences is distinguished by the researcher's views on society and humanity, especially in the field of literature. You can use a various number of theories, the latest theories on secularism or diaspora or linguistic or Barthes or Derrida and so on and so forth. So this kind of personal individual perspective, how and why it will affect this society, how and why will it affect the humanity, that kind of freedom, that kind of liberty should be granted by the individuals, by the researchers, institution, and the university. Unless and until this is not given, there is no way for any kind of liberal thinking, clear thinking on part of the researcher. Hence, this requires that the researcher adopts an unbiased attitude, as they can interfere with the choice of topics, data sources, and choice of participants. So there is no way that we can have any biases towards a particular group, towards a particular a class, towards a particular socio-economic status. We as researchers need to be open-minded, broad-minded as far as the research work is concerned, and therefore we collect data sources irrespective of any kind of personal favoritism. All right. When you are choosing your participants, it is not as if you choose persons belonging to a certain category, persons belonging to a certain religion, persons belonging to a certain social class. It has to be a diversified group of participants, where in certain kind of research requires a number of teams. Cultural and social science researchers have access through communication, interviews, document analysis. They should be aware of the respondents' customs, language, traditions, etc. And therefore, when research is being done in these particular kind of fields, then as I have told you, he or she has to be aware, has to be extra sensitive, has to take into consideration how, whether his research will affect this particular tradition or not, or whether it will have a negative impact on his subject participant. And that the researchers of certain areas publish, teach, or report in their first language. Very important, because since I'm teaching in Gujarat University, where Gujarati is the main spoken language. All of you are students belonging, probably all of you belong to the Marathi background. So it is in certain research areas, it becomes extremely important, say in social linguistics department or in sociology, it becomes extremely important that he or she publishes the report, at least some portions of the report in their own state language, so that it becomes accessible on a larger, wider area of network. Any research activity or results must be safeguarded against outside interference. And this is a very important aspect on the part of the researcher, on the part of the research freedom given to the researcher. There should be no kind of interference, control, or conflict. All right. So there you cannot have any kind of political, social, or financial impositions on you. The researcher should be free of any kind of uh, pressures, so that he is not dictated with certain consequences, withheld or selectively reported by your university or your institution. That is, they might hide, they might not highlight a certain portion of your thesis or your certain portion of your outcome. And therefore, as a researcher, it becomes extremely important to be away from certain kind of impositions, from certain kind of leanings, from certain kind of whether it is political or social background, and to take a aerial view when you are on the end of your outcome or your result of the thesis, that research that is being done. At this point, I would also like to clarify that a researcher can use, as far as the freedom is concerned, there are two kinds of major frameworks that can be adopted by a researcher. That is the philosophical and the theoretical framework for research. And what is the philosophical framework? The philosophical framework is the theory or the knowledge of the researcher. हम सब ने थोड़ा पूरा background study करके गए होते हैं before we meet our mentors, before we go and sit in front of our committee, so on and so forth. So this can be used to improve, to develop, and to enhance the idea of research. So some kind of your own theory that you have developed, especially in the field of medical sciences, especially if you want to adopt a particular theory to a particular text in the field of English literature, or in your own state language, or if you want to adopt a particular sociologist theory to your own state. This kind of unique research is part of the philosophical framework. Then you can adopt a theoretical framework. And what is the meaning of theoretical framework? It introduces and describes the theory that explains why the research problems under the study exist. All right. So it forms the structure. आपने जो theory backdrop वो जो adopt किया है, it acts as a structure, as a framework that can support research study. It is maybe rooted in a specific theory. Say, for example, deconstruction. Say, for example, post-colonialism. Say, for example, Orientalism. All these theories that are part of that can be part of your theoretical framework, and how it can be applied to any other area of study will be part of your philosophical framework. Your own creative ideas about using theory and adopting it to some other source will be part of your philosophical framework. What are the various methods that you can adopt? All right, that is, there are two methodologies, that is qualitative methodology and quantitative methodology. The qualitative methodology, especially it involves qualitative involves collecting and analyzing non-numerical data. Again, as I told, especially for areas like English literature, where you don't actually go and collect any data. You just have texts, videos, audios, articles, etc. All right, to understand the concepts, opinions, or experiences. That there is no way and there is no necessity also to have any kind of data collection as far as research in English literature is concerned. But for other topics, say for statistics or for commerce or for business, you definitely, or sociology or psychology, there is a lot of data collection that is to be done. And that when data is collected, that methodology is known as quantitative methodology. All right. Quantitative methodology involves and collecting and analyzing numerical data for statistical analysis. Right? Say, for example, when your medical sciences, say how many people have taken medicine, vaccines, how many people have been affected by the COVID, whether it has first dose, second dose, all those kind of statistical analysis that is done in certain fields of research, that kind of methodology is known as quantitative methodology, and it involves numerical data, quantitative data, and this data acts as a very important evidence. There is no way and there is no need that we do away with this kind of evidence. It acts as evidence in health and social science, commerce, business, and other kind of research activities which a person needs to undertake. All right, this was part of your freedom of research, research ethics, and society. ये move नहीं हो रहा. Next. We come to duties of a researcher, which are the various duties. All right. So till now, we talked of the responsibility of the university, responsibility of the institution, responsibility of the society, etc., etc. But as an individual researcher, what are the duties of a researcher? Responsibility to respect humanity as a whole. Whatever field of your research is, there is no way that you can do away with this one aspect of respect humanity, respect integrity, freedom, and right to participate. That is, each and every individual who wants to be part of your research activity in your particular field should be included, should have the right to participate irrespective of his or her class, gender, socioeconomic status, religion, etc. Next, duty to prevent harm or suffering. There is the researcher has to take extra care, has to take go extra miles, so that there is no kind of suffering, no kind of harm done even to the animals. You know, a number of research involves guinea pigs and rats and so on and so forth. No kind of harm is done, major harm is done to these animals as well, and of course the human subjects. Next, obligation to inform research subjects or participants. So beforehand, you just cannot barge into their houses or barge into their offices and start giving them questionnaire and start taking their opinions. They have to be informed beforehand before you go on to conduct your research. Next, ensure free and informed consent from the participants. The participants should feel free that they are given the time and the choice and the mode, whether he wants to give whether he literate or illiterate participant, so and so forth. So they should be given the option of giving their opinions in the way they want. In the field of commerce, you have a very good method to find out your research, which is known as the questionnaire, and how and where, to whom the questionnaire should be given, should also be it's also a very thoughtful, important process. Next, obtain research licenses and duty to report the collected data. So if you are a part of any medical science research, biomedical research, pharmaceutical research, or any kind of research which undertakes where human beings' lives are concerned. So it is the duty of the researcher to obtain correct kind of licenses from the government agencies. And after the research is done, we have to duly report the collected data to our institution. Show regard for third parties directly or indirectly involved in research. That is, whether they are your colleagues, whether they are your family, whether they are your friends, or whether it is your anyone else who is involved, who is part of your research process. You should always acknowledge that they all have been part of this research journey. Protect children's rights, needs, and abilities. Take parental consent, report mistreatment or abuse. So, wherever research is being done for using children as their subjects, it is extremely important that we put our research questions according to their needs and abilities. Whether the child will be able to understand my research question. And very important, we have to take the parental consent in the field of, say, education. Anyone who's doing a research in the on the school children, so beforehand we need to take consent from the parents, so that there is no kind of illegal activity after your report is published. Report mistreatment or abuse by any kind of wrongdoer or who uses abusive language as far as the children are concerned. Report any kind of ill treatment of the children to safeguard the small children. Duty to respect individuals' privacy and close relationships. This becomes part of sociological researches done in the field of, say, marriages, done in the field of close other kind of relationships, done in the kind of individual relations with other people, done in the kind of huge families. Uh, all right. Political and religious opinions, social orientation, emotional well-being, sickness and health. All these have to be taken into consideration. You cannot impose your right of being a researcher on any of these aspects. All right. So all of them have to be taken proper care, and only then can you show your interest as being show your right of being a researcher. It is not as if you doing research is of primary importance, but they being your subject, they being your participants in your research is more important than anything else. Uh, Duties of the researcher towards groups and institutions. All right, this the earlier one was what you are supposed to do as a researcher. Now we talk about what we need to do to our uh, groups, our individual subject groups, or as group of teachers, and to our institution to whom we owe our liability. It is important to maintain it is important to maintain confidentiality about the private lives, the use of collected data, give due credit to the subject and not make them anonymous. Say, for example, people have participated in your research. You cannot write their names as if they are not willing, you can make them as ABC. But if they are willing, then you are supposed to write the names of the subject participants as well, and uh, in the reported collected data. So due credit has to be given, and you also have to be show some kind of respect to their private lives, and not to not get too involved in their private lives. Duty of the researcher to restrict reuse of data. All right, so if you have used it for one particular group, you cannot reuse for another group, or for commercial or administrative purpose. Very important. You cannot publish, you cannot show your data where any kind of commercial usage will be used for, or it will be misused for by anyone else. So these are certain duties which necessarily are of primary importance. Store the collected data information in a responsible manner to identify the individuals. That is, you cannot just have all your papers strewn anywhere and everywhere. You have to have them in a proper method, in your pen drive and so on and so forth, so that the confidentiality, the identity of these participants remains only with you. Respect to be shown for dead participants of research. That is, say, for example, if they are deceased, if they are no longer alive, then you have to be very careful, you have to be very sensitive. Graves and human remains to be shown utmost respect. That is, wherever graves are concerned, say in the field of archaeology and so on and so forth, say in these kind of studies, we have to be very careful as far as the human remains, etc., are concerned. Clarify the role definition of the researcher, parallel roles of a therapist. That is, a researcher also plays the roles of a therapist, in the sense of where the subject participant is having some kind of emotional upheaval, then, or psychological illness, then at that moment the researcher will also play some kind of he or she will become his support. He will become his therapist, to give him some kind of solace, so that the subject participant can come out of his own illness. Respect for values and motives of others, behavior and values of minority groups, youth groups. When you are doing a research on youth, you also need to take care of the latest trends, of the latest words, of the latest icons, all right, fashion icons, so on and so forth, because they believe this kind of you need to have a rapport, correct kind of rapport with your subject participants. All right. Duties towards groups and institutions. Respect for private businesses. All right. That is, if you are going to any top industrialists firm for any kind of research, so you need to be aware of the kind of questions to be asked and not asked. Special interest organizations, there are various organizations, NGOs, which are run for various reasons, whether it is social or mental reasons. So this becomes very important, that we become very careful on what kind of questions that we are going to ask. No organization has legal obligation to provide information unless specified. That is, whether it is a private business, or whether it is an NGO, or whether it is a governmental agency, they are not bound to give you information unless you have some kind of letter from an authority. Only then can you ask some information from them. Otherwise, they are not legally obliged to give you any kind of information to you just because you are a researcher. Use of public archives, government agencies, public administration should not endanger national interest or security. That is, when say if you're doing research in the field of political science, in the field of economics, then one has to be very careful that our research will not endanger national interest or national security. Public archives where historical letters or part of videos or part of special photographs, all those things which have become part of national archives have to be handled with a lot of care, have to be handled with a lot of respect. Only then the researcher can be considered to be a true one. Respect for vulnerable or disadvantaged groups. All right, that is, say for example, there are certain vulnerable groups. They especially need the group people belonging to the special needs groups or the disadvantaged people. You cannot generalize them. You cannot stigmatize these groups, or they cannot become part of your regular data, regular analysis. The researcher has to be responsible for protection of cultural, historical monuments, sites, artifacts, texts, archives, remains, and information, the important source for future generation. And therefore, care should be taken that there is no damage or deformation occurs. That is, since these things, historical sites, artifacts, are the only way that our future generation will look at history. There is, as a researcher who is doing part, who is part of the has to be very careful regarding these things, so that there is no damage done in any manner. There is no scribbling, there is no misuse or deformation of these manuscripts. People in Sanskrit department do it in manuscriptology and so on and so forth, reading the old manuscripts. So extra care has to be taken where the old manuscripts are concerned. Research on other cultures and times requires knowledge, respect, and study. No degradation or mockery of earlier historic eras. All right. So if you are doing research of the, say, the pre-independence times, or if you are doing research on some other culture which does not belong to the mainstream culture, which does not belong to the powerful hierarchical cultures, and then the researcher has to be very careful as to not to degrade and not to mock, make fun of the that particular culture. And say if you're doing it in prehistoric times, then we have to take it as a non-biased manner. All right. Which are the various associations and agencies which will impose this kind of rules and regulations for our research? Professional associations, government agencies, and universities have adopted specific codes, rules, and policies relating to research ethics. Which are they? National Institute of Health, National Science Foundation, Food Drug Administration, Environment Protect Agency, Medical Council of India, Indian Psychological Association. All these were in India. American Chemical Association, American Anthropological Association. These are just naming a few. I have not named all of them. These are certain agencies which impose certain checks on the certain limitations on the research. Ethical decisions by the researcher. All right. Researcher learns to interpret, assess, and apply various research ethical rules. These are called as other deviations from acceptable research practices. So now, as I come to an end of my session, I put the entire responsibility on the final decision which the researcher has to undertake. All right. So the other deviations, that is, there are a number of things which will pull you down, but finally it depends on the researcher, the individual, how to extricate himself from them, and what are they, what should be done by the researcher. Publishing the same paper in two different journals without informing the editors, it is very easy to say but very difficult to imply, so put into practice. So you might just change the title, change the wordings here and there. Tomorrow I will talk more about plagiarism, and I will show you examples of how even now recently it was done in here in Gujarat. In two different journals, you just don't inform the editor and you get your article published. Next, include someone else as co-author in return for a favor. All right. So you include your friend, or you include your some other research associate, and he or she becomes your co-author, and you ask any kind of favor, whether it is monetary or any kind of favor from that person. Then another very important thing which a researcher has to put into practice, that he cannot reveal confidential data, use inappropriate statistical technique in order to increase significance of research. That is, बहुत सारे लोगों का उसने statistics gather नहीं किया है, statistical data नहीं कर पाया है, but to fudge the results, जैसे तैसे results output उसको अच्छा दिखाना है, so what will he do? He or she will increase the number of subject participants and show how important his research outcome has been. All right. Failing to keep good records, it is the responsibility of the researcher, whether it is social science, medical science, or even in literature. You need to keep all your records, the bibliographical sources, the primary sources, the secondary sources, everything in a proper, whether on your in your laptop or in your pen drive or in printed form, all of it has to be put in regular filing, so that when he or she is asked for, at that time records are easily available. Wasting animals in research, very important. You cannot say कि हाँ ये जो mouse था या frog था या guinea pig था, that I have wasted, it has gone, because it is now no longer of particular use. So all these things have to be taken care of. Very important. Stealing supplies, books, data, and misuse of electronic gadgets. That is in huge institutions and huge laboratories, or where the funding is very big, this kind of unethical behavior is seen on part of very, very important, very prestigious research scholars as well. So there is no way, there is no need, in fact, for professional academicians like us for stealing such things, for stealing such small, unimportant things of our lives. Stealing supplies, whether it is stationery or papers or books or reference material, data, and misuse of electronic gadgets, just taking away the laptops, taking away the dongle, make use of free internet use, etc., etc. Refrain from doing any such wrong things. Giving research projects to students, PG or PhD. Established researchers, established scholars, established academicians who are so busy, involved in so many thousand other things. What do? They unethically give their research projects to their PG or PhD research scholars, which is a very unethical thing to do, which is improper on the part of the funding agency. Which should be refrained from. Not to acknowledge the contributions made by other scholars in your area of research. Say, for example, there are certain very important people who have contributed, not necessarily your family and friends, but other scholars who have already laid the foundation, laid the path in your area of research. You should also acknowledge, you should also give credit to these kind of scholars. Making promises to a researcher for better grades, quick reviews, early submission, etc., in favor of sexual favors. All right. This has repeatedly and off and on happened in universities, not only in India but abroad as well. That is where a researcher is assured, is promised for the betterment, for the advancement of his career, of his thesis submission, of good grades, of quick reviews, so on and so forth, for the wrong returns. All right. So this the young researchers have to be especially careful in this matter. Exposing research subjects to biological risk. This pertains to the students who are doing research in field of pharmacology, in field of, as we just saw, vaccination drives and so on and so forth, where it might lead to any kind of biological harm on part of the human beings. Rigging an experiment for better results or your desired outcome. That is, जैसे तैसे करके desired outcome ला देना है, कुछ भी करके. That kind of attitude should not be adopted by the researcher, because that is not the aim of any good, pure research. Making unauthorized copies of data, papers, or computer programs. That is, whatever data is available, you just put it forth and show it to your research committee. Deliberately overestimate the clinical significance of a new drug for selfish motives, for monetary recognition or awards. That is, you might get the award of the best teacher in your university or in your institution, but this kind of selfish motive should be refrained. One should stay away from, and we should not over exaggerate and overestimate the kind of significance of our research. All right. So now finally, I end my today's session with the last slide. Educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. This is a very famous quote by Aristotle, where unless and until there is your conscience doesn't work, doesn't allow you to go ahead with some particular research, then there is no need for the researcher by using unnecessary pressures from whosoever it is, and go ahead with the research activity. I thank the committee, and I thank all the participants who have listened patiently on this very boring kind of a lecture on ethics and research and ethical principles to be adopted. But I hope that it has been of some use to you who will begin your journey as young researchers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Any difficulty, any questions? Now this session was open for discussion.
Yes, sir.
Yes, any research student, any question, please raise your hand. Yes, any queries, any doubts? Any question? Yes, all research students, you ask a free and frankly question. Yes, Gaikwad Kishanji, unmute your side and ask your question.
Good afternoon, madam.
Yes, good afternoon.
वैसा मुझे आपके लिए क्वेश्चन नहीं है मैडम, लेकिन
हाँ।
गिनी सर के लिए क्वेश्चन है। सर